Welcome to World Chef's podcast. I'm your host, Ragnar, and this is World on a Plate. Now, today I'm joined with Elizabeth Yorke, a chef turned food researcher. She's a writer and a passionate advocate for building and creating innovative and sustainable food systems. So, Elizabeth is the co founder of Edible Issues, a collective that is fostering through and conversations on the Indian food systems. And she's also the founder of Saving Grains, she'll be talking about, which is like an upcycling food initiative inspired by the historically circular relationship between brewers and bakers. That's interesting. And so today we're going to discuss her thoughts on the food systems, circular economies, and sustainability in general. So just with further ado, I want to welcome Elizabeth. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, great initiatives, Elizabeth. We want to hear a lot more about them. But maybe first, you can share with us your journey from being a chef to becoming a food researcher and now the advocacy that you're doing. What was that inspired you to become a chef in the first place and this transition to the sustainable food systems?
Absolutely. I think growing up, loved food, loved how it brought people together. And saw this through home and how everyone was most joyous and had so many amazing conversations around the table. And I wanted to kind of create that experience for people that was more than my family. And so my journey to be curious about food kind of led me to culinary school. I went to this culinary school, culinary arts program at the Welcome Group Graduate School of Hotel Administration at Manipal University in Karnataka, which is a state here in India. And of course, we learned cooking techniques, but we also had classes on food sociology and anthropology, culinary math, architecture and restaurant design, and one of my favorites, which was the science of cooking.
Mm.
And that sort of developed into my final year thesis project being on the idli, which is a steamed rice and lentil cake that we eat for breakfast, but I can eat it all day here in India. And because we were in a university setting, I got to visit various labs in the university, like the dental materials lab to test the density of the idli or the viscosity. I was testing it at the biophysics lab along with the pH, and I think um, that sort of experience enabled me to start to think about food as beyond my restaurant or beyond my kitchen space. I learned a lot about agricultural patterns that influenced the rice and the lentils and their properties in the research that I was doing. We had conversations on the economical and social impacts of the idli and our public distribution system and governance. And I think um, through this experience, as I said before, like just trying to understand how food extended beyond the kitchen, looking at agricultural patterns to also after food left the table, what were consumer perceptions or waste. That experience spiraled off into me just wanting to learn more, and I got amazing opportunities to attend symposiums like the MAD Symposium and the Oxford Symposium that generously gave me grants. As a chef, I starred in restaurant and bakeries, attended a global entrepreneurship program focused on food. And I think through all this, I was still working at hotel and restaurant kitchens. I had great mentors that were open to kind of helping me take a couple of weeks off a year to learn new things. But through these short-term musings, if I can call that, I kept reflecting on what was my value as a chef. And I think that was something that was sort of my culinary journey to kind of ending up of that resulted in what I was doing now. So in 2018, I made the big decision to step out of the kitchen and ended up as a research fellow at the Future Food Institute, where I was focusing on sustainable and circular food systems, and then building edible issues and then saving grains progressively.
Wow. So yeah, so that led you all to start the edible issues, and so that was a big leap for you, is to leave the kitchen in a certain way. So maybe you can tell us more about edible issues and how that began, and what is what is the goal and vision? What is edible issues?
Absolutely. So in 2018, as I said, I stepped out of the kitchen and was a research fellow at this Future Food Institute program along with me. So we were a cohort of about 15 researchers, various different kinds of professions from about 12 different countries and nationalities. Anusha Murthy, who is the co-founder at Edible Issues, we were the only two Indians in the program. And in the second week of the program, we went through an exercise on talking about innovations in the global food system. And many people referred to the plant-based movement. And we were thinking about, in a country like India, what does plant-based mean when we have such a large culinary repertoire of vegetarian food? People started talking about alternative packaging like banana leaves, and and we look back to our food system and we're like, but we have this there. And I think that those kind of conversations between us made us think about, okay, can we start a space that kind of has this dialogue and conversation? Anusha comes from an engineering background and I come from a culinary background, and this was great because we were talking about, I had an issue of food waste in my restaurant, and Anusha was like, this was a problem that maybe she could help me with her skills. So we said, can we create a space where we can have these conversations, where we can drive thought, we can drive conversation on what it means to build a better food system for India, but also keep ourselves educated with what's happening, not just in our own fields, but across the board. And so that's how Edible Issues began. We look at the food system through various lenses, from agriculture to restaurants to politics to economics of food. We do various public participatory projects to get people thinking about food in various formats, but we also work with chefs and restaurants on their sourcing and sustainability programs. We work on designing new forms of documentation for traditional food knowledge and pathways. And we also work on helping build better systems through our design thinking spaces.
So all these resources. So this is a website or like a community where
Yes.
if you Google Edible Issues, and we'll put the link on Edible Issues on this podcast for our listeners. So you will find a lot of resources. So what examples of impactful projects initiatives have you been undertaking? Can you give us some?
Absolutely. I think one project that I'd love to talk about is the Roots to Resilience project that we're currently working on, which is a collaborative exploration of tuber crops at the intersection of cooking, community, and climate change. And the idea of tuber crops, or these root vegetables, although not very commonly known in urban cities, have a large impact in the communities where they're grown to, and most of the communities are forest dwelling communities. And so we're trying to understand now, with implications and impacts of climate change, what kind of changes do we also see and want to see in the urban foodscape. And we use the tools. The idea is that we move away from conventional agriculture, but we also look at how art and unearth these connections between people and these tuber crops. And so we do this in the form of various exhibitions. We do this in the form of we have a website called roots2resilience.com that talks about the documentation of these tuber crops and different cooking recipes that we've started to collect. We also work with artists to design different kinds of experiences around tubers, and we work with communities as well to understand their challenges and where they need innovation with these crops as well.
Yeah, yeah. Because you're really addressing issues you have within the food systems, particularly in India, but are there also some that maybe they have a resonance with other parts of the world? What typical systematic issues do you have with in India, and and how can they maybe be transposed to other parts of the world? Can we learn from each other?
Absolutely. So when we were doing this tuber project, for example, we had a chef friend from the Dominican Republic who reached out and said, "Hey, I just went to the market today, and out of the 7 tubers I saw on your post, I've bought 5 of them, and I'm working in the same capacity with the same challenges. How are you cooking it? How are, you know?" And then we asked him, "How are you cooking it? And is there any kind of interesting innovations we can swap or share?" And I think what's very interesting is that and what also the problem Ediblicious is trying to solve for is that whether it's in India or globally, we live in our little silos of food knowledge and education. But once we open up the question to the world and see there's so much response that comes because everyone's trying to build, everyone's trying to create something, build for the food system. And I think that this is something very exciting we're seeing globally. So we hope to definitely, for example, a project like this, look at it from a global lens as well in time. But another very interesting global space that we see because of globalization, chefs and restaurants that are cooking with, say, Indian ingredients globally are looking to get good quality produce from India, but also try to also have understand what sustainability impact they are creating by sourcing from set particular farmers. And then that's also where we come in, where we can, because of the field work we do, we can also connect them to people who they will be able to help through the sourcing, or give good quality ingredients or novel ingredients that they might not find in their geographies where they're trying to build. And so that's the bridge we're hoping to build and try to kind of create.
Mm-hmm. Because you have another project I mentioned in the introduction, and that's saving grains.
Yes.
And so that's maybe one of the sort of the impactful project that you have. And so what inspired you to start the Saving Grains initiatives? And you know, what is Saving Grains? Can you explain what it is?
Absolutely. So, as cheesy as the name is, saving grains, we hope to be saving brewers' spent grain from going to landfill. And as the curious cook that I am, ended up interning with the historian William Rubel back in 2016. And I was very curious about bread and trying to understand in the little restaurant that I cooked in why we couldn't make a beautiful tartine like sourdough. We obviously had very humid conditions, but our flour was also not great quality. And so my initial quest was, how do I get a good flavor quality flour? And so I did this internship, and on this internship I realized there was this very interesting product ingredient that we worked with, which was brewer's spent grain and brewer's spent yeast. So brewer's spent grain and yeast is the byproduct of the beer brewing process. The brewer's spent grain occurs in the very initial stages where grain is soaked in hot water. The liquid, the carbohydrates come out into the liquid, and that's where you get your sugars for fermentation into beer. And you're left with this delicious porridgey mash of barley, malted barley, and wheat that is most often given as cattle feed. And But historically, brewers and bakers worked in similar spaces because they shared the base ingredients of grain, yeast, and water to make bread and to make beer. And they also shared byproduct. So a baker, if they had leftover bread, they would give it to the brewer, and the brewer would use it to ferment into beer. There's a great company called Toast Ale in the UK. I think they've rebranded recently, but they make some delicious beer from leftover supermarket bread. And inversely, the leftover grain and the leftover yeast would be given to the baker because grain was a very expensive commodity. So how do you they would use it to bulk up the bread and also to ferment using the yeast. This is very interesting because that solved my problem here back at the restaurant. The grain was flavorful. It added a kind of flavor, and the yeast added a kind of fermentation that I wasn't able to get. We weren't able to make the tartine style sourdough, but we were able to make a equally delicious product. And so that happened in 2016. At that time, there were about 20 microbreweries in the city of Bangalore. And then when I came back after my future food research and I looked at the ecosystem, still there were now 80 microbreweries, and each brewery would use about 200 kilos of grain to brew 1,000 liters of beer. So every day we were looking at about 12,000 kilos of this good product that was being left behind. So apart from flavor, the spent grain also has a high protein and fiber content because the carbs have been released into the beer. So the grain that we work with has about 23% protein and 46% fiber. So it hits the nutrition markers. It's a tasty ingredient. And so why was it being just randomly thrown away or given to landfill or as cattle feed? We could actually use it within the food system. And in India, we have problems of nutrition deficiency. We are seeing demand for protein. And so basically I was like, I've worked with this ingredient. I really am passionate about building product from it. And I think I missed working with food as much as I did when I was in the kitchen. And I was like, here is something, my big question of what is my value as a chef? This is my question. I have the culinary creativity and capability to take something that people consider waste and actually transform it and build product from it. And so I started Saving Grains in 2022 with that intention. We are a micro upcycling kitchen, as we call ourselves, but we cater to breweries. We manage to repurpose the product. We make flour, we make granola, we make cookies and biscuits, and we try to basically we're trying to build a whole upcycling food system ecosystem for Bangalore.
Wow, so you really put it into practice, so you're manufacturing, you're working with the breweries to recuperate the spent grains,
Yes,
and so this is enabled you to then market a new product.
absolutely.
So the impact. So what has it been the impact? You've been saving a lot of grains.
Yes and no. So last year we upcycled about 2,000 kilos of spent grain,
Yeah.
which is just a small amount, but I think it's a good start. Because I think some of the challenges in this space are that because it's so new and nobody knows about it, I think, bringing a market to product is a whole new ball game. But I'm excited to be able to learn so much about it and work in that capacity as well.
Yeah, have you
So
got some good
yes.
feedback from from the your partners, and so people are interested from customers from the market?
Yeah, people. So very excitingly, we make a cookie, which is about 50% brewer spent grain, and people actually think it's a chocolate cookie, but we don't add any cacao, we don't add any kinds of chocolate or cocoa in it, and so that was very interesting for me when we first started out because people are confusing the malt flavor with chocolate, which is inherently what we grow up drinking, a malted drink. But that was that was a very interesting sign. People love the product. The biggest reaction that I get at markets and stalls is that people taste it and say, if we didn't know what you told us, like, we would never have guessed it's a healthy food, or we would have never have guessed it's anything made from waste. So people enjoy it either ways. And I think that I feel like it adds a lot of value that I'm able to bring in that culinary, because healthy is again something that most people associate with not tasty,
Yeah.
or even something with waste has such a negative connotation,
Yeah.
so-called waste. But I think the idea that I'm also able to convert these skills of mine and be able to build a product that are tasty as the primary focus, because flavor is, it has to be flavor first. And I think that's something that's been really exciting about the journey so far. I mean, to feed brewers their own byproduct and have them have that reaction to it has been really exciting.
Precisely. So like a brand new product came out of, so product innovation it's actually spun out of what was initially to save the grains. And yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a great a great success story, and hopefully we will see it grow, and also inspiring others and our listeners who might be listening to this, how you can use the culinary skills and find new ways to launch new products that we didn't think existed, but as they
Absolutely.
need to adapt. About the future, what is your vision now for the future of sustainable food systems, and how, just like you mentioned now, how can professionals get involved? Can they support these? Can they get involved? Can they engage with you? Or
Absolutely. I think that the future, I'd like a future which is full of collaborations and agility.
Mm,
I think from what I mean, we know of food and land, soil, air. It's not standardized, and I think that our systems also have to kind of cope, and that's why I love the kitchen space, right? It's built on agility. It's built on collaborations, and I think looking for more of those kind of spaces or building more kind of those spaces is really powerful. Um, and I also think that, like, just how can chefs and food professionals get involved? I think just be open to experimentation. And I think from the experience and the recent feedback that I've gotten with an ingredient like brewer's spent grain, it's unknown, it's different to work with. It has a lot of fiber, so our hydration properties are off the charts. It's And then what kind of hydration? Do you hydrate with fat? Do you hydrate with water? So that's another whole conversation. But it's also hard to communicate with customers. It's not right now social media friendly and trending. But the smallest window to collaborate with initiatives like ours can have a long have can have a like a long big impact.
mm,
And I think that, like, I would also say there are a lot of negative connotations about upcycling waste in restaurants, but it's very interesting that a lot of chefs are already doing this by using materials. They just don't define it as that. But I think that a lot of times a great pushback that comes is that, oh, we don't have the time, or we don't have the resources like people to sit and to dry out the grain or to work with different materials. We have to, like, we have a set task to do and we have to do that. But to that I say absolutely fair, but also sustainability and circular economy is not a one person job, or it's not a single restaurant job. If there's an ingredient that you're binning, that's too tedious to repurpose, like if you have coffee grounds and you want to convert them into mushrooms, you don't have to grow it in your restaurant. There are so many people in the ecosystem that are more than enthusiastic, case in point, who want to collaborate and do such work. And it's all about just reaching out. So sustainability often, I feel, is just thought of to be very singular, but the idea is that we can build so much more just by collaborations.
yeah, yeah. And I guess a great first step would be to go to your website and see how you build an ecosystem of people collaborating. So for small restaurants or cafes or however small you are, that they can reach out and work with local partners. They don't,
Absolutely.
yeah, do it from scratch, and what great innovation can come out of that. So,
Absolutely.
so a final question. So what does sustainability mean to you? I know you've worked a lot on the ideas, and so what for you is sustainability? Can you explain to us your vision?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question, which is still very much a work in progress. As I said, like many chefs, we're probably practicing sustainability without, at least I realized I was working with ingredients, trying to use the whole ingredient before I knew what sustainability was in a restaurant context. For me, that slowly went to mean, tackling the food waste issue, and to look at upcycling, look at innovation, culinary creativity. But also now that definition has extended to food service and food care. How are we feeding people, and are we looking at what kind of food we're putting out there for them to consume, or how are we looking at the agricultural ecologies, or or the spaces of those who grow our food, and how are we using food as a tool for resistance and for talk and for change. And I think that those are what I think sustainable food practices are. It's a really difficult word to define, but I think that as we look at how do we, and I really like the term food citizenship, because it means that we are practicing whatever we're practicing through food, we're trying to do better for the economy, for society, for the environment, rather than harming it in any way. And that makes us good food citizens. And so, yeah, I think that's my sort of space to sort of navigate through the various kinds of properties of sustainability, but it's still a work in progress.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you for that, Elizabeth. Thank you for sharing that. It's really interesting. And so, can people? We're going to put all these resources on our podcast page, so people can click into the links. So, can people contact you? How do you how can people get involved with what you're doing? Is there a on the website there is a way means to participate?
Absolutely. So for edible issues, if you are interested in the food system and the Indian food system, uh, feel free to reach out to us. We're at edibleissues@gmail.com as our email, or we're on social media, on Instagram as edible.issues. If you're curious about upcycling, brewers spent grain, talking more about the model we're building at Saving Grains, again, our website is savinggrains.in, and we're on Instagram as Saving Grains. So feel free to drop us a note there. I'll also share my personal email, which I'm happy to put in the chats if anyone wants to reach out. We're very open, as I said. Collaboration is key. So happy to have these conversations with anyone interested in building better systems.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Elizabeth. Thank you for sharing your incredible insight with us today. So,
thank you so much for the opportunity. I think we've through culinary school, the association has been something that we've always looked up to for resources, and I think it's really great to be here.
thank you so much. And again, we've been talking about the importance of sustainable food systems and lots of innovative work that has been done through edible issues and saving grains, and how actually any chef, everybody can make a positive impact with great resources. So thank you again, Elizabeth, for joining us. Thank you, everybody. You're listening to World Chef Podcast. I'm your host, Ragnar, and this is World on a Plate. And looking forward for the next exciting episode. So please subscribe and follow us.